good evening. And on behalf of Best Life Brands family of companies, ComForCare, At Your Side Home Care, and Care Patrol, we'd like to welcome all attendees from around the country and Canada to the live presentation, Tips for Positive Communication During the Holidays. My name is Stephanie Wierzbicka, Manager of Strategic Healthcare Programs here at the Corporate Franchise Headquarters, and we'll be with you tonight. The purpose of this webinar is to support and educate family caregivers caring for loved ones with dementia and provide some practical strategies on common communication challenges around the holiday and new challenges that are presenting themselves because of COVID. We also want to share knowledge of dementia and effective communication strategies and how to adapt these strategies in the light of COVID for your unique situation. And finally, this new knowledge will enable you to create better days this holiday season. Now, before introducing you to our speaker, I'd like to run through just a few housekeeping items. First, this presentation is around 45 minutes and will provide some time at the end for questions. Attendees are in listen-only mode, like I had mentioned. However, each of you have a chat feature that we encourage you to ask questions in which we can all engage in a conversation virtually. And now I'd just like to briefly introduce the company that is hosting this educational event. Best Life Brands includes a suite of companies all focused on supporting exceptional senior care solutions. One Best Life brand company, ComForCare and At Your Side Home Care, has a unique opportunity to assist families and seniors experience in-home care that helps them find meaning and purpose while keeping them safe at home. One of our greatest passions is to guide families and clients through their care journey that introduces caregivers into their lives who care like family. Additionally, we have a care enhancement program called Dementiawise, recognized by the Alzheimer's Association and created in conjunction with today's speaker, Heather McKay. Dementiawise allows us to provide patient-centered care that creates better days for those living with dementia. And secondly, Care Patrol's main focus is to assist families and individuals find the right senior care living options. They can help families identify senior living options in their community and facilitate the entire process from taking tours to moving in. And because of this, they build trust with their clients that is so important with a true life transition. And now for our speaker. As I mentioned again, my name is Stephanie Wierzbicka, Manager of Strategic Healthcare Programs here at ComForCare, and I get the unique opportunity to develop programs that can help our clients live their best life possible. And I work very closely with Heather, and together we actually help manage and collaborate on many programs or events like tonight that is brought to you by Dementiawise. Heather McKay is with us and a collaborator, like I said, when it comes to client-centered dementia care services. She is an occupational therapist, dementia care specialist, and international trainer and speaker. In 2016, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America named Heather Dementia Care Professional of the Year for her dedication and devotion to serving individuals living with dementia, their families, professionals, and her community. Heather, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Stephanie, it's a treat. You know, it's a treat for me always to be with you. And I thought I would mention just a little bit more for the audience, those of whom I've not met yet, about what I do here in North Carolina, to give you a sense of where these stories are going to come from. Because I want to put together our time together tonight with lots of stories, some of which come from my local work in community-based practice over the past 15 years, including a decade of home health and hospice. Now, it was convenient in my hospice organization that we also did home health. And what that meant was that under one roof in the same organization, I had a continuum of care. And some of the stories that I'll tell tonight are about people who were just diagnosed with the disease. Mm-hmm. And some stories are about people who are transitioning along that decade of caregiving. Well, in addition to my local work, I get out of the office a little bit and get to do some teaching and consulting, as Stephanie mentioned, with partners like ComForCare and At Your Side Home Care and Care Patrol. So some of the stories I'm going to share with you tonight will be about people that I've met on the road. And last but not least, my storytelling is always informed by the fact that I'm a family caregiver myself. I always say once and for always, because although my grandmother's passed away now, she lived for the better part of 15 years with vascular dementia, that second most common type. And I learned from that experience as one of her caregivers many things that I could never learn from a course or from the book. And I believe that my grandmother is still teaching me. So I'm excited to be with this group again and swapping more stories today with the purpose of raising awareness of common communication challenges that people living with dementia and their caregivers usually encounter around the holidays. And we'll think about some new challenges that you could face this unusual holiday season in light of COVID-19. And I'm going to share some knowledge of dementia and effective communication strategies. And then we'll adapt those strategies in light of our situation this year as we all do our best to stay safe and control the spread of this virus. Well, overall, we hope to enable your family to create better days with more positive communication this holiday season. And I look forward to hearing from you. Throughout today's program, you'll have opportunities to enter your thoughts in the chat and share things that you've noticed about your loved one's communication. And please share strategies that have worked for you in the past. Collectively, I know that we have more knowledge than any one of us has alone. Well, here's my schedule for those of you who like to see the blueprint before we get started, people like me. First, we'll put our heads around what common communication strategies arise when your loved one and you are communicating. I'll ask you to share some previous communication challenges that you've encountered in the past. See, I have a feeling that some of you have learned some really good lessons, and we could all benefit from your tips right out of the gate. Then, adding to your experiences, I'll describe some more challenges that I've heard from caregivers all over the country. We'll forecast some different challenges that could come up this holiday season. And then, with a good sense of what communication breakdowns look like, we'll gather more information about the disease itself and specific brain changes that impact communication. I want to help you figure out what might be the underlying root cause of your challenge. Once you know what's lost in the brain with dementia, as well as what's spared, why you can see what's going wrong. And a few evidence-based communication tips will make some good common sense tonight. In that section, I've got a feeling that lots of you are going to appreciate the science behind why some of your best communication strategies work. And if you're running into some stubborn problems, things that keep falling flat, you're definitely get some new ideas for what to try next time you run into that problem. Well, armed with some science and some new ideas for change in communication, we'll connect the dots back to those holiday scenarios and imagine some strategies in a few new situations. While I plan to share stories as we go, we'll do one step better in that last section and open the chat lines again for you to share some new ideas, the aha moments, or questions or thoughts about what you're looking at differently after tonight. So that's how it'll go. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's just break the ice for a second and hear from a few of your communication challenges and successes. I've got the chat window open on my screen, so I'll see what you type. Think to yourself for a minute. Can you think of a time when communication with your loved one was difficult, but you figured out something that worked? So you're bringing to mind a challenge that was hard before, but you tried something new and it's going better now. Feel free to unmute your line or just chat. If you've got a communication challenge that's going better recently, give us an idea of what you've tried.
Definitely encourage the chat feature, just because I'm sure there's a lot to share. So if those of you that are on the webinar here with us, if you want to just throw something in there or even in the Q&A, we can definitely share. I see that one has shared that we have lots of challenges, not necessarily some of the solutions. So
I'm with you,
you've come to the right place.
Yeah. Oh, we're all in it together, Shelley. Has anybody figured out something recently? A challenge is an attitude when talking about herself. What works is talking about her grandson instead. Oh, this is a good one, Diane, and I think I can read your mind. If you're pointing out issues with the person who has dementia, they kind of feel put on the spot, get a little defensive. But if you shift your conversation to something that she loves to talk about, like her grandson, it changes the whole mood of the visit or of the communication. Love it. Oh, Mr. Gray said you learn not to argue or to correct her with more information. Exactly. Chris said, if he asks his loved one, well, they might say no. So he just goes ahead and does it anyway, sort of putting some things in place, putting a ramp up to the house. And once it's already done, she loves it. I call this really good caddy work. You know, setting everything up in place without burdening the person with a whole lot of the details or questions and instructions along the way. Make it all right, present the finished product. Love it. And Shay's got one of the best and most evidence-based strategies for us. Redirecting to something that she likes can sometimes drive around that automatic no or turn an upset mood into a better interaction. See, I knew this was going to be the case. Y'all are adaptive people. Tonight, let's build on those really good experiences and many more. Since I consult with families in my local area all year long, I've noticed some patterns in what those caregivers say around the holidays. Since the holidays are upon us, see if any of these concerns ring a bell to you. Lots of people are worried about helping their loved one to do special holiday activities. One man said, "My wife doesn't realize she needs help preparing the traditional holiday meal, but I offer to help and she just says no." Well, I got a pair of sisters in consultation who have a great sense of humor. And they tickled me when they said, "Mom's cooking was never really good, but we don't trust what she makes by herself anymore." They said it's been a challenge because our mom can say no 11 ways. But we finally figured out how to weasel into the kitchen and be cooking together. And one sister tickled me when she said, "At least we can eat the food again." Well, if they're not worried about accomplishing tasks, lots of people are worried about making the visiting time more enjoyable. One son said, "Mom can't keep track of the family tree. She asks who these people are, but when I explain, she doesn't understand how we're all related." So the visit sparks 1,000 questions, and the man's explanations just serve to confuse his upset mom. Well, maybe you've run into that with your loved one. Other folks bring up this problem. Their loved one doesn't understand the situation. You know, the holiday activities bring up all kinds of different memories about family, and the person with dementia may be expecting to see certain family members. One woman said, "My husband doesn't understand why his family's not here, but the people he's thinking of have all passed away." And the same son who was trying to explain all the grandkids, to his mama, well, he was also trying to explain to his dad that the older family members had all died. Well, that went over like a lead balloon with his confused daddy. The son said, "When I started to explain the situation, my dad just gets upset and he wants to go home. We are at home." He said he just doesn't understand anything about this situation. There's one more common challenge that families tell me about around the holidays. When the person with dementia actually does really well in social situations, and see if this rings a bell. The daughter who was a primary caregiver for her dad said, other family members see dad looking his best at our holiday get together, and I can't convince them that we've got bigger problems in our typical daily routine. And she said, I swear they think I'm making this stuff up. Well, let's just pause for a second and think to yourself again. Are you anticipating any of these challenges this holiday season? Now add COVID precautions and social distancing to the mix. You're probably already predicting some new communication challenges this month. I'm loving what I'm seeing coming through in the chat too. I'm glad you guys are generating all these ideas. Here's what I already heard from concerned caregivers around this past Thanksgiving holiday. See, some of the same concerns are coming up with Hanukkah, which starts on Thursday, then Christmas, then Kwanzaa, then the New Year. I mean, geez, I'm hoping that we get Christmas or Easter holidays back to normal. But between now and then, we've got to make it through while our traditions are upside down. The two sisters, that are so funny, they said, we're planning a different kind of holiday get together this year. And I'm afraid Mom just won't know what's happening. And goodness knows, everybody I know who's communicating with a person living with dementia says this, I'm afraid the person with dementia won't understand people talking from behind the masks. Well, the same families who were worried that their loved one doesn't understand the situation in big crowds, well, they're also concerned that their loved one won't understand how the pandemic has changed their holiday plans. One wife said to me recently, see, it's just one more situation that they don't fully understand. My husband doesn't understand why everybody's not coming to our house this year. He knows it's Christmas. He knows it's a time for family to gather, and he thinks nobody cares about him. She said the isolation is really affecting him. And while I understand the reason for social distancing, she said his loneliness is breaking my heart. Well, other families have said this holiday is the hardest because they don't expect to get a redo next year. They said it just doesn't feel like the holidays without our traditional gatherings. And Heather, how can we bring the holiday spirit to Mom during what could be her last? Well, I got a feeling that with this long list of communication challenges and many that you've put in the chat, that everybody has a potential challenge in mind in their own situation. And we're all on the same page with what communication breakdowns look like. And we know that we're not alone in this boat. So communication is a constant hurdle for all dementia caregivers across the board. But by continuously gathering information about the disease and communication strategies that have been tested in research, why families around the country tell me they are resolving their biggest communication challenges. And I cannot think of a better holiday surprise. Well, research shows that positive communication starts with a closer look at the disease itself. And knowing more about dementia can help you understand why your loved one communicates the way they do and why some of your old familiar responses just don't work anymore. Learning about the disease also helps you understand why the good strategies do work. When you know about dementia care communication, this is the good thing. You don't have to think of an original response in every interaction with your loved one. You can use these general strategies 11 ways across countless scenarios and tailoring your responses to your loved one and your situation. Now, pictures help me talk about this stuff. Those of you who know me know that's true. When I show this picture, it always helps to get a quick little terminology lesson out of the way first. See, this is something that you could share with friends and family, and the vocabulary is actually not common knowledge. So practice this explanation on somebody that you know. Dementia is an umbrella term. So my hands automatically go up when I say that because it's a category of diseases. But what really gets heads nodding is when I say dementia is a word like cancer. See, people understand that cancer is an umbrella term, whether they say it like that or not. They know it's a category of diseases. And under the cancer umbrella, you got many different types: skin cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, goes down the line. People know that skin cancer is different from lung cancer, but they're both cancer. That terminology is useful because the dementia words work the same way. Dementia is the word up top. And under the dementia umbrella, we've got Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontal temporal lobe dementia, list goes on. Now you can say Alzheimer's disease is different from vascular dementia and all the rest, but they're all dementia. That's a pocket explanation that you can tell somebody who wasn't here on the call, and they can repeat it to people they know, and then we're all working toward this public awareness about the terminology. So the pro tip is connect that terminology with something that people already know. And now your family will understand when you say Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia, but all types of dementia affect communication. Now they won't get confused when you start talking about communication strategies you learned tonight, because we're going to stick to the strategies that work for everybody with dementia, no matter the type. The brain changes I described, they're common for people with Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, and every other type of dementia. And we can expect these changes to happen in our loved ones as they progress through the timeline. So for example, you notice in the brain on the right, so much smaller, and every brain with dementia shrinks over the course of the disease. Now, you'll be glad to know that this shrinkage is not happening in the healthy brain just because you're getting older. Take a look at that brain on the left. Would you be surprised if I told you these two brains are exactly the same age? That's a healthy 82-year-old brain on the left, looks as good as mine. So everybody relax, your brain is not turning into a raisin just because you're getting older. Well, now focus on another change. In that brain on the right, see how much darker it is? Well, the brain color change actually makes a difference in your life. It causes a particular kind of communication challenge. It reminds me of a gentleman who was thinking of his wife who has dementia when he told me about this particular communication challenge. He said, listen, Heather, my wife's communication is not the same all the time. He says, sometimes she's with me and sometimes I just can't get through to her. And I know what he's saying, especially when he says, does his little fingers like this. Sometimes her communication is firing on all cylinders, but sometimes the communication is much worse. And he's describing common fluctuations that happen in that brain with dementia. It's an important lesson about communication and dementia to keep in mind that fluctuations are part of the territory. The reason for the fluctuation is the color. See, in any type of dementia, there are cells that are sick before they're dead. And it's the sick cells in the brain on the right that are slightly darker than healthy cells. Now, those darker cells are not dead yet, so don't count them out. But here's what you got to know about sick cells. They're unreliable. They'll fire for you 1 minute and quit you the next. Now, have you noticed that your loved one has good days and bad days? Good times of the day and times when communication and everything else is just harder for him? Well, I asked the husband if he'd noticed any patterns when his wife seemed to be firing on all cylinders and when her communication just wasn't clicking. And this gentleman, like I say, is what I call an expert noticer, because he said, yeah, I've noticed that her communication is the best in the morning after we've had breakfast. He said, so I tackle the most challenging tasks with her then, because that's when we seem to be communicating the best. He said, if it's after 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, forget about talking her into something. He said, it's just best to go with the flow and make the afternoon routine as easy as possible. He said, or you're going to have a fight on your hands. Well, you might be thinking about fluctuations in communication that usually indicate your loved one either is not feeling well or maybe experiencing pain. If you pick up on those fluctuations, you're an expert noticer. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed that your loved one's not at his or her best when they're hungry? Yeah, blood sugar is an important fuel in the central nervous system. Our brains like a steady flow of blood sugar, not too high, not too low. Even your healthy brain fluctuates during the day as your blood sugar sort of peaks and drops. Now look at that brain on the right again. Those sick cells are good for nothing on an empty tank or low blood sugar. One woman said, after telling me how hard it was to start the morning with her husband, she said, something I figured out. I started bringing my husband a little bit of juice, orange juice, to help him wake up in the morning. She said, when I offered him the juice, I sat down in the chair beside the bed. He would drink the juice and we would spend a few minutes just chatting. She said, not about anything important, but before I asked him to do something, we'd just have a little visit there. She said, I could tell right in front of my eyes, he was coming to. And what she was noticing was 1 billion sick cells starting to fire. She said, the first time I asked my husband, are you ready to get out of bed? And he said, yeah, I about fell out of that chair. She reminds me that communication with a person living with dementia is not just about what you do, but about how you do it. Now, you might even notice the fluctuation in a 5-minute period. For example, it's difficult for the person to understand what you want them to do, and you might need communication strategies to help them get started. But once they get started, you might notice they get the hang of it, and their communication seems pretty good, clear as a bell even, about the activity once they're sort of into it. These are just some of the fluctuations that appear in communication of somebody with dementia. It just reminds us to watch closely for fluctuations, take the pro tips from those family experts, stay flexible, schedule the more challenging activities for those times when she's usually firing on all cylinders, and be ready to try something different if your first attempt doesn't work. Now, there are multiple areas of the brain that affect communication and cause problems when a person has dementia. So I just want to look a little deeper into the brain and see some other changes that affect communication. This is the memory center. It's called the hippocampus. It's about 1.5 inches in if you went in on both sides. Now, memory is probably the first thing that people think about when they think of dementia. Most people, I think, know that dementia takes short-term memory and leaves long ago memory. And what that does to communication just means that, wow, somebody with dementia is probably struggling to talk about what happened recently, but they might be able to tell old familiar stories without skipping a beat. Let me mention a few other memory files that not everybody knows about. They definitely affect communication. So have you noticed that a person with dementia, listen, y'all, can ask you the same question back to back to back to back? It's like as soon as you've answered, he's fixing his mouth to ask it again, and it's 100 times before breakfast. That's called immediate recall. Shelley's like, yes. Immediate recall is even faster than short-term memory. And it reminds me of a woman, a family caregiver, who was thinking about her husband. And bless his heart, he woke up first thing in the morning with a question on his mind, starts asking his wife, when's my daughter going to be here? Well, again and again, his wife is answering the same question. She said, she'll be here at 3 o'clock. She'd turn around and have to answer it again. After a while, I expect her around 3. He'd say, I wish I knew I'd be getting ready if I knew when she was coming. She said, you don't have to get ready till after lunch. She always comes at 3. Well, does this sound familiar to anybody? The wife notices that she's repeating herself in rapid fire, but she'd never heard of this immediate recall. Now, she was happy to learn the name of this, that it's an actual thing. But she had one more question for me. She said, Heather, explain to me this. How is it that when I get tired, my sweet little 3 o'clock, turns into 3 o'clock, honey? He will wheel around on me and say, I don't need that kind of attitude out of you. I'm just trying to get some information around here. She said, how am I in trouble when he can't remember the last 100 times I've answered the question? Well, I point to another memory file preserved by dementia, and I'm going to put my little pointer on the outer edge of this hippocampus. It's called emotional memory. Emotional memory, folks, has nothing to do with the facts, and it's spared all the way through to the last stage of dementia. And in emotional memory, The feeling sticks when the facts went through that hole. Well, in this case, what's actually being communicated has more to do with the vibe, a feeling, the impression in their interaction. So let me point to your brain for a second. Let's appreciate your emotional memory. You've got that center of your hippocampus up here, emotional memory file, and it affects all of your communication. It's the way you scan for a feeling. I think of it like a radar. It goes like this. And I scan every interaction for the way that person makes me feel. Think about it. Can you tell when somebody's lying to you? It's not in what they say, it's how they say it. And can you tell when somebody makes a good first impression? Sure. I mean, in North Carolina, some of y'all are from down here with me. Tell it. We call it, they rub you right. And it has nothing to do with really what people say. It has everything to do with how they say it. So now everybody is going to get this one. Can you tell when somebody's talking to you like they think you're stupid? Yeah, you pick up on that fast. We say in our culture, they're talking down to you. And when you think about scanning for the vibe, you realize emotional memory catches the tone of the speaker's voice. Did you notice what was different in the woman's response to her husband when she said 3 o'clock and 3 o'clock? Yeah, I mean, you heard it. The tone changed and she's busted on the tone. Well, the most important thing I've ever learned about dementia care and communication to this day is that I've got that radar and so do they. See, people with dementia are scanning for the feeling and picking up on an impression in every interaction. It means that I pay close attention to how I answer every question, even if it's the 11th time. It caused me to do like this 180 shift away from the facts and focus more on the feeling. But while we're on the subject of answering questions, let me share another tip from research. For years, I understood the importance of watching my tone, and I paid close attention to making my communication feel respectful. And believe me, I'm with you, Shelley. After 100 times of responding, this is easier said than done. So when I say work hard, I'm like working hard to keep that tone friendly and respectful. But it doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes. I just notice when a person is responding to the feeling. However, answering these repeated questions is such a challenge for us all that I keep my eyes peeled for any kind of research on this topic. And when I came across this study, I stopped in my tracks. I think you're going to like this. It was a study about people losing immediate recall and the ability to hold new information. To boil down the results, they found that if the caregiver could keep the answer consistent, it was a little easier for the person to remember. Did you notice with the caregiver in the story, she answered her husband the first time. She said, oh, your daughter will be here at 3 o'clock. The next time she said, well, she's coming at 3. And then she'd say, well, we don't have to get ready till after lunch because she always will be here at 3. Well, see, with that study in my hand, I realized her answer changed slightly every time. And I also realized that my answers were changing all the time, mainly, y'all, to entertain myself. But I realized with this evidence that I could change my habit. And now I try really hard to pick an answer and stick to it. Another area of memory loss, y'all, that affects communication is called situational memory. It works like this in your brain. You understand your situation because facts hang together in order. Okay, situational memory puts facts and events together in order. The order is key. We take it for granted, but every situation has an order to it. And look, it's how you know why you're sitting in that seat tonight. I mean, this situation that we're in right now, it started with A. Maybe it was when you learned about the webinar. And A led to B, led to C. You put it on your calendar. You woke up this morning and thought, tonight's the night for the webinar. You made it through your day. You logged on about 7:30. C led to D, led to E. That's how we got here. So everybody understands their situation with situational memory. And it's not only helps you understand what's going on around you, but it also helps you do the steps of a task in order and string tasks together to finish a whole routine. So, for instance, you came to the meeting today looking as good as you do because you got up this morning and first you did A, and then you did B, and then you did C. See, your morning routine has got an order to it. Well, without situational memory, y'all, things just don't hang together in order. And a woman says, I can tell my mom is not washing her clothes regularly because they're visibly dirty, she said. But mama swears up and down she's washing like usual. And a fancy word for filling in the gaps or just making up the story altogether is called confabulation. When mom can't recall the order of events, she may feel like she did it. See, remember, she's got that good emotional memory working. She may recall her old familiar routine, even though she didn't do it that way today. So she just tells you what she feels like she did. Oh yeah, she said, I do a little bit of wash every single day. She said, I just take my old clothes off and put them in the laundry hamper, and then I wash it up when the basket gets full. Her daughter's sitting there looking at me like, no, she doesn't. Well, now that you know about situational memory and emotional memory that's spared, you'll be a better detective to spot those confabulations and explain what's happening to other caregivers on your team. Now, there are other parts of this brain that are changing that directly impact communication. And I just wanted to hit on some of these because we're going to build a toolbox of strategies that they kind of work better for communication, but we got to understand how folks understand language. And this is the part of your brain that you're using right now to understand formal language. I'm using a lot of formal language to explain things. That part is caved in right where my little pointer is. And those cells are sick or dead. So the person with dementia is having trouble understanding formal language. That means they don't get our instructions, our directions for how to do things, or our explanation of the facts. And I don't know about you, but this is terribly inconvenient while my loved one is asking me these constant questions about how we got here and what we're supposed to be doing. Let's pause for a second and think about another way to get your point across. When you're talking to somebody who doesn't understand your instructions, like, are words really your best tool anymore if they don't understand the language? What else could you try other than words? Like, lots of you just automatically think of gestures, use your body, pick up objects, demonstrate what you're talking about, and you're just right on. These are all examples of visual cues that they can really improve your communication. People are looking for you to show them what to do, not just tell them. And while there are still some types of language that people understand better than formal language. So have you ever noticed that they can do this back and forth social chit chat really well? You walk in and you see your mom and you say, hey, mom. And she says, hey, honey. You say, well, it's good to see you. She says, good to see you. Like, it sounds like she understands. Yeah, she does. It goes back and forth with that tick-tock rhythm. And I use my body to give her gestures in case she misunderstands any of the words. And I keep that feeling positive and friendly with my tone of voice and facial expressions. Bada boom, bada bing, we got better connection. If I notice she's just acting like she understands, look, who likes to be made to feel stupid? I mean, I can go with the flow too. So when I'm given information during a task, I break down the instructions into doable steps. I use fewer words and more visual cues with my body and things that we can both see. So when I set her up with each step of the task in the right order, at the right time with a little bit of rhythm, that's what I call good caddy work. And it's not just in the area of the brain where she understands the language. Check out where the language is produced. These are big holes. Now you're looking at the area of language production, and people with dementia are having trouble finding the words to say. It's formal language that goes first again. So they can't find words to name objects or tell you what they need. I remember the frustration on my grandmother. I could see on her face. She couldn't explain what it was she wanted me to do. And she knew what she wanted to say. She just couldn't say it. I remember wishing that I was a better mind reader. The automatic social chit chat, though, is in my toolbox because not only could she understand it, she could spit it out too. You might notice that a lot of language your loved one produces is rhythmic. That's because rhythm is spared longer in the brain with dementia. Just think, there's that rhythm to the chit chat. I say something, you say something, we toss it back and forth. You might know that music is spared longer in dementia, and many people already have this in your toolbox. You might know somebody who can sing better than they can talk. Prayer is also similar in that way. Just think, music and prayer, they've got rhythm. They're old familiar memories, and they're both emotional. Those are just two really powerful communication tools for people with dementia. Now, there's some words are hanging around here in this brain at the bottom that could be part of the person's language that never were before, because there's a file spared by this disease called expletives. And don't freak out. Everybody's got them. You probably first learned your first cuss word when you were 2 or 3 years old. If you let one slip or took it out for a spin, that's probably when somebody in your family started teaching you impulse control, or the difference between good words and bad words, or when to use those words and when not to use those words. Well, just be careful, because those words are flying out of people with dementia when their filter isn't what it used to be. It's another chance for us to just let it slide. Keep the emotional vibe positive, because look, it can feel like you're talking down to the person if you slip into this, no, 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 that's ugly. Brace yourself for whatever the hell they're going to say next, because you can really get into a tug of war if you start the no, no, no back and forth. Look, so tips to help the person get their point across with a little less frustration: give them more time to tell you what's on their mind. Go with the flow, and ask them to show you or use more visual cues if their words just aren't coming to them. Well, it's not just expletives that are flying out when impulse control changes, but all of the behavior and judgment, and knowing when to respond a certain way and when to be quiet. Take a look at this frontal lobe, last picture. It's helpful for if you're ever showing this to somebody in your family, if you tell them that the brain is on the table like this, because when you're looking down the middle of that brain, you're actually looking down the middle of the guy's head. The frontal lobe is at the bottom. So if I put my finger on it right here, it's actually behind his eyes. You'll see that it's receding back like a hairline. I think about this like the reins on the horse. The reins have been cut. The social graces are out the window. The filter ain't what it used to be. All of these things that families tell us. Well, I wonder if you've also noticed that your loved one might startle more easily than they used to. And it's true about all people with dementia. Just think about it. They don't understand their situation exactly. They don't understand all of the communication they hear. And that little fight, flight, fright reflex, that protective startle button, is working overtime without the impulse control to hold it all back. So another tip is to approach the person without startling them, to give yourself and them a better chance at starting your interaction on the right foot. I mean, after all, it's not a good idea to start just by scaring the pants off somebody. When your interaction starts comfortably, you make a positive emotional connection before asking the person to do something, well, then you're more likely to drive around that automatic no and win their participation. All right, so I hope everybody knows a little bit more about the brain with dementia, and you're starting to kind of put these dots together with some underlying root causes of this communication breakdown. Let's just connect back to some of those holiday situations. Remember the caregiver who said, my loved one doesn't realize she needs help to do things? Well, here are some things that you could try if you want to help your loved one do something. I mean, it might be something as simple as stand up from a chair, but it might be more complicated, like making a family recipe or, merciful heavens, wash the dishes. You're going to give some simple information. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I run into. Our caregivers just tend to give too much information to folks, even though they don't understand the formal language as well as we do. You could ask a person to help you. When you ask for their help, it's a different vibe than telling them that they need help themselves. Exactly like your idea about switching the vibe from talking about what your mom needs to actually talking about her grandson. See, that was just changing the vibe. And here's another way to change the vibe. Give people simple choices. Ask them to try. Break down the activity into steps. Give instructions just one at a time. And use your body and objects to show them what you want them to do. If it's not working, back off and just give them a little time and then try again with another one of these things on the list. Here's another good list of tips. Some of you might already be using these. Remember those folks who just simply wanted the social time to be more enjoyable, like without the pressure of doing a task? Here are some tips for social visiting this year. I mean, first of all, don't skip it. Now that you understand how important the social chit chat is for people living with dementia, whether it's on a video conference or live face-to-face, this is the kind of communication that they need to feel less lonely and more emotionally connected to their loved ones. So taking the time to visit is more important this year than ever. During your time together, go with the flow. Realize that the facts won't be 100% accurate. It's all right. They may even make up things, invent the details. It's okay. You can focus on the emotional memories and those old stories that they know even better. It helps to show some objects that you're talking about, so don't come to your visit empty-handed. They're watching your body to understand what you're saying. Now, let me just say, does this make anybody else cringe when you think about wearing a mask? This has been one of my biggest challenges this year. I'm inspired by the families who tell me their online visits are even more positive than their face-to-face visits because they can see each other's face. I would strongly suggest, if you've not had a virtual visit with a loved one who lives away from you, because you're afraid that the technology will be a barrier between you, see if you could try it. Maybe you could work out some of those glitches and actually have a really nice visit together. You may be just smiling at your loved one or chatting with them. You may be carrying on a mostly one-way conversation. It's all right. Maybe you're singing to your loved one or reading some favorite scripture, but they're going to see you and hear you on that screen. Since I'm physically with people a lot and I'm behind a mask, I tried a few of the adapted masks on the market. I can just be your sort of product reviewer here. Let me show you a couple that I tried. I started with this one because it was the most transparent. But look, y'all, you can't breathe at all behind this thing. This thing is like a suffocation trap. I threw it out. And I ordered this one. It's a little better because it's got the fabric that makes it a little bit more breathable. And you can still see my smile. This one works best if you have the anti-fogging spray. No kidding, it actually works. But see, the sound of my voice is still a little bit muffled behind the plastic. So it's not perfect. At the end of the day, I've grown to love the screen time with older adults, even if they don't fully understand the situation, and I can give them just so much more visual cues for better information. Now, even though getting good at these doing things together, social visits are all proactive tips for dealing with distress, I thought I would leave you with some tips for just this kind of communication, because distress is going to happen no matter how good we are at the other strategies. Let me break down this style of communication itself and then just offer up a few mistakes that I notice. Maybe you'll see what's working and what's not working when you try this in real life. Okay, the recommendation is to connect to the person's feelings when they're upset and use redirection or distraction, like you mentioned in the chat. But has anybody ever tried that and it fell flat? I know I've bombed plenty of times. Okay, it's going to happen to the best of us. If you get shut down, and we're all going to get shut down eventually, check out these details in your communication. 1, did you approach without startling the person? And 2, did you sort of rush to that redirection a little too quick? See, this is just a timing mistake. And it's tricky to get this timing just right. But see, in our culture, we have a term for skipping ahead to the redirection or distraction. We call it, and it hits our emotional memory file, it rubs us wrong. We call it sweeping the problem under the rug. That's just a timing problem, folks. If you notice that happening, don't worry, there's a better way to practice. Just go back to this middle step that you see on the page. Spend a little bit more time connecting to the person's feeling. You can use empathetic statements like it looks like, it sounds like, or it feels like, and then point out the feeling. You can use some of the person's words to let them know that you're listening. And once you've got their attention and you've made that emotional connection by talking about what they're really concerned about, then your redirection is more likely to work. So we've got some folks on the line who have tried that, are old pros at it even. But if those of you who are running into a stubborn problem, dealing with distress with your loved one, I hope you've got some good ideas in this area. Boy, the time flies when we're talking about this stuff. And I still want to know what's resonating with you the most. So just think to yourself for another minute. Do you have at least one new idea today? Something that you might try this holiday season to improve communication with your loved one, or something that you'll be watching for. Just take a little time to type in the chat box again. If you'd like to tell us what you're taking away as an aha moment, or something that just resonates with you, something that you can vouch for and say, yeah, I knew what you were talking about when you said that. The emotional memory, Chris, is one of the most important things that I come back to in every program about dementia. Spread that to everybody you know. Courtney said, I can only talk to my grandma on Zoom weekly, but it's helpful. Oh, good. I'm so glad that you guys have that screen time. How do you suggest explaining why we're not able to see each other on Christmas? We keep talking about the virus because I worry she'll forget why we haven't seen her. I think that that's a really good tip to give a little bit of information, but keep it general. We're just trying to stay safe, keep everybody safe. We're going to get together as soon as we can. I miss you. Let's see each other more. Since we won't have Christmas this year, let's make up for it. I'm not giving too much information, you notice, but I'm mostly connecting to that feeling that we want to be together even though we can't. Sometimes it's enough to say we're doing the best that we can right now. I'm so glad that I can see you on the screen. I love you, Grandma. Oh, Greta said, I like the tip about taking a pause and then offer the juice before getting started. Do you love when chemistry and common sense communication strategies come together? I believe in the chemistry. Those sick brain cells need some blood sugar to start firing in the morning. But it was really all of the things that she did. Taking that pause you mentioned, getting down on his level, using the social chit chat. All together, she changed that morning communication, and they got the day started on the right side of the bed. I'm kind of like you, Cynthia. I'm picking up on some of these strategies for myself because, you know, we are more similar than we are different. I learn a lot about how my own brain works by studying the brain with dementia. Tashay, I think we've got to get creative, like you say, use the internet more for connection. In a recent study that just came out this year out of California, they were looking at how the whole country had been managing especially in long-term care, the care for elderly people and people with dementia during COVID. And listen, the results are not very complimentary at all. Folks have been more isolated, more lonely, more depressed, worse quality of life measures in those folks. And lots of times they're not even using the online resources that they have available to them. So Tashay, be like me, share with others, encourage people to get connected online. It's the best we have right now, and it's much better than nothing, much better. So many great ideas. Is it possible to get this information for caregivers? This is a really good question. And Stephanie and I are constantly working to create new programs, tip sheets, small, short webinars, all for caregivers. Stephanie, you want to tell them what's coming next?
Yeah, so we have a lot of exciting programs that we will make you aware of here at the start of the year. What we can share with you now are a lot of different tip sheets and resources that we have developed over the years. So I will be following up with all of you to thank you for attending this webinar, and we'll share some of those resources with you. So you have a lot of some of the strategy that Heather has shared with you this evening in sort of a worksheet format that you can go back and reference and say, okay, what was Heather saying about that redirection, or what should I really do in the morning? So some of those tips and tricks, so to speak, that she shared that can really set you up for a different experience and really set that positive tone to get your day started will be shared in many resources that we'll make available to you after this webinar.
Let me share one other thing, because I got this great question from Holly. She's like, how do you teach a 93-year-old to use the internet? And you remind me of my great Aunt Sarah, who's actually 97. And she has one person, one caregiver who's in her bubble. You know, she's not getting out, not seeing all the people she normally does, but she has one caregiver who's in her bubble. And without giving my Aunt Sarah all the gory details, without all the instructions, she did just like the gentleman on our call did tonight. The caregiver set up the Zoom call and just boom, there it was. My aunt has been using Zoom thanks to that one caregiver who, you know, just like the gentleman, put up the ramp and now she loves it. Well, my Aunt Sarah, 96, she's on Zoom. She has no idea how, but she loves it.
But it works. Yep. And I think that's what's so helpful, is that when you do have someone, you know, supporting you in the home that can just kind of help guide that person. You don't necessarily have to teach them, because those steps, they may not ever learn them. But as long as you can kind of get them connected, that's where you can find that connection and where it can be so valuable.
Thank you.
Just for sake of time, Heather, did you have another closing thought here?
Well, I just wanted to sort of recap that you know, communication around the holidays is challenging for people living with dementia and their caregivers, and not getting any easier because of COVID. But changes in the brain are contributing to that communication breakdown, and adapting what you say and how you say it can make doing things easier, social visits more enjoyable, and dealing with distress more satisfying for you both. So facilitating more positive communication this holiday season will require some knowledge of the disease, a few practical communication strategies, a little creative problem solving, and a willingness to try something new. And finally, I just always say that caregiving is a team endeavor. So find your team, y'all. ComForCare, At Your Side Home Care, and Care Patrol are among the best teammates that I know. Thank you to these helping organizations for making tonight possible. And thanks most of all to our audience for setting aside the time to learn a little more about dementia caregiving.
Absolutely. And Heather, thanks to you. And again, I'm just going to say thanks to all of you for joining us. Like I mentioned, I'll be following up with everyone. Again, as Heather mentioned, we like to say caregiving is a team sport, and to find your team. Your ComForCare and At Your Side in-home care agencies are located all throughout the country and Canada, and we're here to support you and your family's unique needs relative to in-home care support. I mentioned earlier that we have a unique program called Dementiawise, so we specifically understand what some of those unique challenges are like in caring for someone like dementia. And we work with Heather McKay so we can actually incorporate a lot of the strategies that she's taught tonight into the way we approach care. We also take extra precautions during this time and follow all CDC guidelines to make sure that our care aides and caregivers that come into your home are protected and safe so we can provide the best care in the most safe environment possible. Also, our folks over at Care Patrol are to assist you. So sometimes living at home isn't always the right solution. So they can really help you find those right communities in your area that can provide that independent assisted living and memory care that can be really beneficial for families who could really benefit from that type of setting. So again, thanks to all. Thanks for your time and your interest. We will be following up. And if there's anything that we can do for you, please feel free to reach out. We're here as your partner in care to support you and your loved one and whatever their care needs might be. Thanks again, Heather, and thanks to all of our attendees. Good evening.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.